Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni,
bringing you this week's Ascended World. So we were like, we always kick around a title right before we get on. It's like, okay, so what are we going to call this one? And we're like, how do we ride the conscious creation Richter scale? Because that's pretty much like, the visual.
yeah,
what it feels like.
right.
And it's not a bad thing. It's just different.
Well, and we got to the in the conversation of how we got here, of we find that as we progress through the expanding consciousness and everything else, that the highs get higher and the lows get lower to get our attention, so we feel it rather than just being numb to it.
Right.
And
it was a continuation on last week's discussion where we had started talking about, I just had it. We were talking about, having to putting energy into creation, right?
Wanting's not enough.
Wanting is not enough, right? And that we just need to put the energy toward it. And then how much energy do we put toward it? And then how much change do we want? Well, this is like part 2, right? So it's part 2 because in the free flow of conscious creation, which is truly what it is, it becomes setting ourselves. Good morning, Yasmin. It becomes setting ourselves out of vibration, right? And this is what we do. This is the vastly underestimated thing that we do here, right? Is when we talk about holding ourselves at a vibration, right? When we hold ourselves at a vibration in conscious creation, that means we are eliminating everything that does not meet that vibration or requiring it to rise up, which means that everything that is of those other vibrations that don't accommodate it are going to fall away. So that's when the tower, like we were talking about last week, the tower card and the tarot deck, right? And stuff like that. Right. And so as we are evolving in this consciousness, and we are getting more adept at conscious creation, what's happening, right?
Right.
We create these, and yes, and Sarah and I were talking about how it seems like instead of the highs and lows are getting closer together, they're becoming further, like almost like we have to shut, like it's that, oh yeah, well that doesn't shock me anymore, so I have to create something else to shock me. That's even more.
And we started talking about in terms of roller coasters, that it has to get bigger, scarier, more dramatic, the drops, the climbs, everything just to get our attention, to draw us in. And I read something earlier this morning talking about the different vibrations and how the higher vibrations, some people find those unsettling and that they're more comfortable with the lower vibrations. And so why are we trying to raise our vibration in this whole expanding consciousness journey? And someone had a great response saying, well, the creative energies are those that are that more erratic vibration. Mm-hmm. And, when you look at the energy of matter as it changes state, it goes into that excited state first, like you and I have talked about here. And then it solidifies in those longer, deeper waves of the Om sound and things like that. And so it's almost like a twofold. The bigger vibrations create the change. They bring about that change. And then they get solidified into this reality and into our reality with the deeper vibrations.
With the more, I would say the more extended ones, right? So like that's the crumbling of the stuff that doesn't match it, right? And that's the setting in of that manifestation, right? As we create. Are your dogs playing again today?
Of course, the only toy with a squeaker in here.
So, and so the thing is, yes. And what we do when we start talking about vibration, and this really gets beyond what many people think about, which is, it's really interesting, I have had this for a while. I've had this funny, and you and I've talked about this so many times. I've had this funny experience with some clients and stuff who, like, we do this work together, and then they have these massive changes in their lives, and they give everything else credit but the work we do together, because, well, it can't be that easy to just shift a vibration, right?
Right. Right.
And it's like,
And it becomes so natural that you don't attribute that as doing something different.
right.
Because there's less ritual, there's less structure,
Right.
it's just more coming into who you are, which
Right.
of course that feels natural. So why would you say, oh, that's what did it?
Right.
It's the same as
It has
not
to be
giving
the things
yourself
that
credit.
it has to be the things I do, which are the smaller frequency waves. When it's the things I'm being, right? That's the big,
Right.
wider ohm wave, right? It's like when you're holding yourself at that vibration of being at this vibration, that's where you're holding it, and everything else is falling away, right? And when we do something like, okay, a Reiki session, or you do even a massage or whatever, like, you can do some change, and then that's the faster waves, though, because most of the times it's a temporary change in vibration, and then you let it go again, right? And then you go back
Right.
to wherever the other stuff was, and you might let go of some stuff, but it's not. And it's like, but when we hold ourselves at the vibration, it's like, in my mind, I'm seeing that big, like you're talking about, that ohm wave of, like, no, we're holding the vibration, and as we hold it, everything else just shakes out.
Right.
And that's so encompassing. It's so complete. It covers everything. And it is so easy, because it is basically just shifting our consciousness to a different creation. Now, the unsettling part of that is, yeah, the ego has to be willing to let go of very uncomfortable things to let go of.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and to a degree, the ego has to agree to support these new creations.
Yes. Without
Which
the
is
other things that were its little pet candies,
right, which is an evolutionary process for that ego to say, okay, I can now be comfortable with this.
Yes.
I can now support this vibration versus resist it.
And it is partially also that stepping into self-responsibility. Shameless self-plug of our, like, Wonderland
Right.
program, right? It is
Right.
stepping into self-responsibility to know, I hold that vibration. It's me who allows this to be created or not be created.
Exactly. I choose.
I choose everything, however it plays out, whether I'm conscious of it or not. And this is where we've come to. It seems really sort of hard ass, and it sort of is, in terms of our expanded self, because when we agree to align with that, then it's time to say, okay, all right, we're going to do the Om creation. We're going to do that extended wave. And to do that is simply opening our inner doorways, opening all the things that we block ourselves from accessing this, right? To hold to know that we can hold whatever vibration we want, and let go of whatever we want, and recreate as instantaneously as we want, without the expectation of how long it takes and all that kind of stuff.
Right. And one of the things that I know I personally have had to look at is when I get to that place to where I'm like riding those Om waves, and I'm bringing in that creation vibration that I've chosen, and it feels comfortable again.
Mm-hmm.
I find that I want to fall back to some habits and some behaviors that don't necessarily support that, but I don't realize that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it tends to want to undermine it, because I haven't really gotten to the core of why I was holding those habitual patterns.
Right. Which then comes to the sitting with things, right? Sitting with men. And it's funny,
Yes.
because I had that over the weekend, of course, right? I had
Right.
things, and it was a pretty flowy weekend. It wasn't like it was pretty nice. I had a nice Mother's Day or whatever. But I'd had a couple of little things that came up that were like pinches, right? Little pinches to myself.
Right.
And I did start to get agitated, really about, and there's some little things. And then I came back to going into presence. Oh, excuse me, a presence meditation of just being present without doing anything and looking at, all right, let me just stop. Now I'm come to this place of, before I try to change something, let me stop and look at it and see if there's something I need to get from it before I change it so that I don't recreate it again. Right. So I let myself sit with it all for like a day. And it was like last night I was doing a meditation in a bath, and it came to me because I just was literally like, okay, let me look at it now. Like, what is this? And then I was like, oh yeah, I can see the pattern and I can see what it means. Okay, thank you. Like, now I see what it was. Now I can go change it.
Right. Right. Now I can incorporate that into the overall vibration of what it is I'd like to create.
Right. And then it'll be easier for me to let go of the other stuff because I've looked at it and it's given me the message it was there to give me.
Right. I've held on to the energy of that long enough to get what I needed to get from it. And now I can set it free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that that's where a lot of people come to well, this doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It does. That's
like, oh, it does.
It is working.
Very completely.
Yes. 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 Exactly.
Very completely. And so, and it's funny because there was something else that I was sitting with this morning, and it was really funny. It was a familial thing. And then I was sitting in meditation, and literally I came out and I had a voicemail from my sister. Like, it's like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, my mom, she never calls me at like 8:30 in the morning.
Right.
So, it was funny that it's funny how like and then that was part of some of the stuff I had looked at, and I was like, oh, you know what? Look at that. And I can just hold that now. And then everybody else can panic because I've now cut my cords to that energy or whatever. But that's how it all happens. That's how it all happens with our stuff. And, when we were talking about the highs and the lows and whatever. And so it feels like when the ego feels very uncomfortable with that, because it feels like it has no ground under its feet. And that's why the Richter scale thing came to me, because one of the things that's most disconcerting to most people is earthquakes, because where do you go? Where do you run?
Well, and it's the thing that we take for granted as being, this will always be this way.
Yeah.
And when it isn't, it rocks your world.
Well, and it's, so it's like what we were talking about on Friday is, so like we always have, and we've talked about this in the past, right? The, what are my precious, what's my precious? Like, from the Lord of the Rings, what's my precious? Oh, precious. Don't touch my precious. Right.
Right.
Because we all have them. Right. And so it's like, we always talk about shadow work and looking into the depths of the shadow. And it's like, well, that's where we have any answers that are left unrealized, right, are in the depths of the shadow, because we hide them in the cracks and crevices and then put them in the closet. Right. So
secretly gain strength.
Yes.
From them.
From that. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And propulsion. Right. Because we want to propel ourselves away from it, or, to keep it suppressed or controlled or whatever. So, when we get to that place, it's like, okay, so then what are my precious things, right? What are the things that are most precious in our lives? So what yesterday was Mother's Day. Most of us, it's like, well, what if it had to do with never talking to your kids again, or your kids dying, or, something like that, right? What if it's your spouse? What if it's like the thing you hold most dear, your house, your, where you live, your relationships, like Sarah,
your status,
right? Yeah.
Your status, your earning ability.
Yeah. And, we were talking on Friday, and you said, well, if you got the guidance to leave your marriage, would you go? And I said, if it was true guidance, I would. Yeah. No, I'm not going to say it would be easy, because, I love my husband and we have been through, like that kind of stuff. And it's not like I'm planning it or anything like that. It's like taking that precious, right? The thing that you feel like is crucial to your foundation of existence, right? Because that's how the ego has then defined it. Mm-hmm. Say, because, and here's the thing, and people might be taken aback when you say something like that, but it's like, and then I said, okay, yeah. So what if you woke up in the morning and said, and you basically got guidance, don't ever talk to Angela again. Or don't ever talk to Sarah again. I mean, and it would be unfathomable in my mind because we've been, such close friends for so long. And it's like, but if the expanded consciousness says it's time to do something for some reason, you might not even see why.
Right.
Ever. Right.
Right.
But the thing is to get to that place of trusting. Course number 2, your
Right.
guidance, course number 3. But that's the challenging thing. And I'm not saying that's ever going to happen, right? But it could. And the thing
And the fact that you're open to that possibility allows that to go into that equation that we talked about last week about, I want to create this beyond my wildest expectations,
Yes.
which means that you've released all these things,
all the attachments. Yes.
all the precious, to where anything can flow in, anything
Yes.
beyond your wildest expectations.
Yes. I mean, it's funny because, there's people I've talked to who've had spouses die at an early age. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was devastating. Like, and kids were young and things like that. And then, right. And then they rebuilt their life in a completely different way and all this kind of stuff. And then it's like, well, yeah, but at some point y'all agreed that spouse was going to step out. And right. That was the way it was going to happen so that you can move forward. And that's how it happens sometimes. I mean, those are the soul agreements that we have. This spouse fulfills what they were here to do. And okay, well, yeah, there's really no way to manage that detachment without, like in our,
without a complete and total. Right.
Yeah. So, well, that's one of us is going to do that. So, and that's what happens. And so there's no difference. Right. And we put so much weight on things like marriage and whether it's successful or a failure based on how long you're married and things like that. But it's, and the thing is, your closest soulmates are your closest soulmates, and they don't have to be your closest. They don't have to be physically part of your closest circle for your entire life.
Right. Right. It's the, serving a purpose, serving an agreement.
Yes. Yes. And I was talking to someone who I would consider part of my spiritual soul tribe on Friday, I haven't spoken to her in over a year. And yet we get back on the, like it's time we get called, it's time for us to get on the phone or get together or whatever. And we're exactly in the same place. And we had 2 very different experiences in the whole past year, but we literally had to have everything come together so that we got to the same exact place. Like she literally had some big epiphany that sort of got her completely on the same page as me. So by the time we talked, it was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm working on too. Like, that's so funny. And we're talking about this. And that's what we do. And it's like, well, when we take away the requirements of, oh, we have to talk to each other every day or every week, right. Or we have to be in each other's lives all the time. And sometimes we are. And then sometimes we're not. And it's all good without judgment, And so it's the same thing with our families, our biological families, our kids, our spouses, our parents. And there's times when we just say, I don't need to do this anymore.
Right.
Right. And when we open those doors, it goes to that change of, okay, if I say, what if all you say is, and this is where I've sort of been getting to, is I'm ready to simply exist in bliss in every moment. I'm ready to exist in bliss and live my passions. And I trust the universe to support me in that, to allow it to be easy and fun and enjoyable and love-filled. And I'm going to throw it out to the winds and let it happen. That's a really big, big acceptance.
And I don't believe many experience that at 100%.
No, because that also means sometimes letting go of things that your ego is holding on to because it defines it through those things, instead of your expanded consciousness saying, except that's what holds you back is your ego defining yourself through these external things. Right.
Right.
And that's the big change. That's the big roller coaster. Right. And it's almost like we've we've been training ourselves, I think, and that's where we got to with the highs and the lows being bigger,
Right.
is like, okay, well, can you deal with this as you're letting go of this stuff? Right. You know, and so like we're pacing ourselves.
Exactly. Right. Right. Yep. Boot camp kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I guess you could call it boot camp, but yeah, that's got such a negative connotation for people, but it truly is in many
Right.
ways. And it's training ourselves, retraining ourselves to remember how to step into our real divine infinite ability, right? And say yes to ourselves 100% with no fear.
Right. Which, you know, I've been looking recently at the definition of freedom, and I find it falling short of what I feel freedom means, because so many people they conjure up this image, but freedom is so much more. And that's what we're talking about here, is that ultimate freedom of letting go of everything,
Mhm.
which it almost feels kind of the opposite, because you're so unencumbered that what do you do with yourself? Well, how's that free?
Right. Right. And it's because we tell ourselves all the time, no, I have to have this. I have to keep this. I have to keep this status of life. It's funny because I'm in the middle of rebuilding stuff and talking to a lot of clients that I've had over the years to just sort of get some feedback. And, it's funny. I was talking to one last week and she goes, you were clear on helping me understand my truth when I wasn't willing to accept it yet.
Right.
And she goes, because I wasn't willing to accept it because everybody else was telling me, no, you can't do this. You can't change that. You can't sell, you can't sell your multi-million-dollar business because you're not happy in it. That's crazy. You built it up from scratch. Why would you do that? Right. Even though she had all kinds of physical stuff and, it was like, yeah, because it was killing her literally. And so, it's like, you can't leave your marriage. Like, he's not abusing you or anything, and it's like, I mean, people say things like that.
Oh, my ex-husband did.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah. Well, when you wanted to leave. Well, I'm not abusing you or anything. What's your problem?
Yeah, what's your problem?
Such a low standard we have.
Right.
but I mean, that's what she went through. I mean, and it was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, it's good to sort of rehash that. And it's all coming up at the same time, because it's like, well, yeah. And that's what happens is we deny ourselves our own truth because of what we've convinced ourselves we have to do to make other people happy.
Right. Right.
Because I'm a bad person if I don't make other people happy.
Right.
And I,
well, or I need to control their happiness because I don't trust them that they'll create their happiness their way.
Yeah.
I don't trust them. So I need to do that for them, especially like with children and things. As we turn them loose into the adult world.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a challenging, and so like, we say, oh yeah, I got this. And no, because you know what? Every time I say that, I hit on something else.
Right. Another precious pops up.
Another precious. And sometimes they're surprising when you look at them.
Right. Because to the rational mind, they don't make sense, but it's that irrational, illogical, emotional side that's like, but I've so buried why I need this.
Right.
In my unconscious mind, that's where having that conversation and sitting with that, you uncover that perceived need you have of why this is something you're unwilling to let go of.
Right. Right. And right. And instead of asking that kind of question, because then sometimes the ego gets very defensive, right? Why aren't you like willing, like, oh, it's like, so how is this serving me? Like, what is it here to tell me? And that's a very neutral and inquisitive way to be. Cause it's like, okay, I'm stopping and I'm heating.
Right. I'm available for a conversation with
That's right.
this.
Let's have a little visit and a little chat, and then we can go on our ways. Yeah. And so that's the really powerful insertion, that has sort of shifted a lot. And I was talking about that. Yeah, I was talking about that with that other person that I was talking with on Friday about the presence thing, because she was
Right.
talking about this. This is another person that was talking about how she's talking about, because she's had so much physical pain. This is like I said, a different person altogether. The one I was talking about, the soul tribe person that I had.
Right.
And she was like, and she'd been living all this physical pain as conscious as she's been, because she finally got to a place, but she's looking at, well, I can talk to people about how to be present with it and see how it's serving you before you shift it. And I'm like, oh, that's exactly to where I am right now.
Right. Right. Well, it's like you talked about the power of the pause to stop and acknowledge and say, okay, I'm sending this blaring message to myself.
Right.
I think I should pause and listen.
Right. Right. And be okay with it and not like judge it, not like be angry about it or frustrated. It's a matter of, because I feel like that's a key for us in terms of truly letting go and truly changing. People ask all the time, what can I do to really change and not just have it be a quick fix?
Right.
Right. Or not have it come back around again, because I've had people say, oh, well, I thought I changed this, but now it's come back and kicked me in the butt. And not only that, but the peaks are higher and the ebbs are lower. And, I feel bipolar. And, it was interesting because on that even, very similarly, I was talking to somebody about, they had gone on a year of taking antidepressants, right? Because they had a hard time fitting themselves into a box that they didn't really want to fit into, but they were forcing themselves based on a expectation, right? So what they said was, so basically it took out my lows, but it also took out my highs. And I just felt like I was just sort of meh for a year. And it was funny that they told me this after I had no idea they had been on antidepressants, but I made a comment about how, I don't even remember how we got into it, but I had said something about like, right. Oh, because of change, because people aren't willing to look at their own truth, because that would mean they'd have to change a lot of stuff that they feel like are the foundation of what their reality is.
Right.
And then when that grumbling starts to happen and those things start to crumble, the ego freaks out and then it becomes a panic attack or whatever. And then I said, and thus comes the addiction to antidepressants in our entire society, because people like start change and then they freak out and they balk and then they go on antidepressants.
Right.
And then they just accept what they were trying to force themselves to accept, but their expanded self was saying, no, it's not for us, and making it like really, rumbly. So instead of looking at that and sitting with it and saying, what are you here to show me? And then they go on. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not judging antidepressants. I'm talking about it has become an addiction at a collective level. Like there are many who,
which is really an indication of us not being given the tools to, like we talk about, to sit and say, okay, what does this really mean?
Right.
Not just, I need this symptom to go away so I can keep doing this because I believe this is what I need.
This anxiety is just inconvenient to me.
Inconvenient. Right.
Because I need to do this, whether I'm happy about it or not. I mean,
and sometimes it's a question of sitting with something and it's a misunderstanding that's creating the anxiety.
Right.
And you still can keep doing this, just get the misunderstanding out of the way.
Right.
So there's so much, and we've talked about that, the power of just sitting with things and being.
Yeah. So Michael says, is it because the ego was out of balance or isn't feeling whole, it freaks out with change? Well, yeah, because it's always trying to build a whole building block thing, right? To build a foundation of protection, of like how to
safety,
maintain its perceived boundaries of reality, right?
Right.
That where it's comfortable and comfort is.
And it as we've process through our reality, we've run into experiences that we've deemed bad and don't want to do again. And so we've created protection mechanisms, and the ego's like, these are my precious because I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah. Right.
So
because we
I will
perceive that,
preserve
yes.
this.
Yes. We
I will
perceive
preserve
that
this.
if it happened once, it'll happen again. So we're going to do everything we can do to not let it happen again.
Right.
Which is, yes, the preservation. So then it becomes this force. And literally this person was trying to force themselves into a box of comfort that this one little thing that the ego is like, yeah, I won't let go of this yet. Right. And this is a very conscious person, very conscious person.
Right.
Very powerful in creation, everything else. And then it was funny because then she was like, well, and then after a year, I was like, you know what? I'm done. And I weaned myself off. And she's like, and immediately I could get excited about things. Like she said, like it was such a huge difference. Like everything went back into color. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not dissing antidepressants. What I'm saying is they've become like a Pez dispenser in many cases in our society to flatten out these. And instead of dealing with, why are you anxious? What is the ego anxious with letting go of? And why have we become so desperately attached to certain basis of reality? And that's where I think, because we are changing dramatically right now, that's probably why we've become so bipolar in many ways, right? And anxious because the ego goes, whoa, I am totally uncomfortable with this.
I can do a lot of things, but not that one.
Right. Or not those 100 things that are suddenly dumping in the tsunami my way, kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's the anxiousness that many of us are feeling under the surface. And I would say, I know so many young adults who are in therapy right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's because, and it's because they have this unpointed anxiety, like where you look at the picture of their life and you're going, well, what do you have to be anxious about? And yet there's all kinds of anxiety coming up. And it's like, well, they're not really willing to, they want to complain about it, but they don't want to change the foundation of how they exist to shift it. And it's like, well, I think that's probably the last key for us, right? Is to allow our reality to shift. And it's like, what if you did let go and just went with the wave?
Right.
What if you just said, F it. Let's see where it takes me.
Right.
And I have found that I have had the biggest growth in my life when I've kicked myself off the high diving board. And screamed for the first couple of seconds, but then, was delighted the rest of the way down because of all the other crap that, like that I would have never experienced had I never let myself do it. So it's a challenging thing to say, like, because many will say, well, where do we start? Right. It makes me exhausted. Like people say, oh, that just makes me exhausted.
Right.
And it's like, well, the first step is always looking inside, coming back. And I want to roll my eyes because we've only talked about that every week for how many years?
I know. Well,
going inside and finding a way to stop and disconnect.
Right. And start having those conversations inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a dialogue. I mean, it is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. It is a conversation. It goes both ways internally. Mm-hmm. And coming to that place of compassion and acceptance internally.
Yes. And saying, you know what? I see you. And thank you for showing me. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you for giving me the message. Even with that discomfort, even with physical pain, even with an illness, even with whatever, right? It's a lot of learning to exist in such a different manner, right? And it's, if we completely, and like the ego freaks out and says, well, if we completely detach from everything, then what's the purpose? Then how are we stay connected? And I'm like, well, the thing is, if we detach from everything, we're connected with everything.
Right. Yeah, the connection is so different, but it's so universal,
And
multiversal,
authentic.
omniversal.
Yes. Then it's tough because then the things, it's like this, we might be attached to 15 things, right? But those 15 things have limits on themselves because we're attached to them. And I can only do this. I can only do this. How many people, and I'm not, like I said, there's no judgment here. This is just observation and the experience I've had with my clients over the years. How many people are married to somebody and all the stuff they do around being married to them, all the stuff they do for themselves is based on being married to this person, meaning like this, the other person doesn't like the people they hang out with. The other person doesn't like to hang out with people. The other person doesn't like to do their hobbies, the things that make them really happy. So then they limit the time they spend doing their hobbies to accommodate the happiness of the other person. How many times? And we say it's in the name of marriage, in the name of making our marriage a priority. And it's like, well, except if we truly come to a place of loving each other unconditionally, then we let each other be free to be who we are without limits. That's the different way of existing. And the limits are saying, well, I have to be with this person. I have to make them happy, which is a misnomer anyway, because nobody makes you happy but yourself. Right. And so to do that, I have to spend this time with them. Whenever they're home, I have to be with them. I can't go out with my friends, or I can't go away for a weekend without them because that's wrong, because I can't go away without my spouse. I mean, I've had people say that to me, and it's like, well, and it's funny because I've never had that in my relationship in the 29, almost 30 years I've been with my husband. Is go do your stuff.
Right.
Go do.
Right. Go do you.
Go, you do you. And if I want to come along, I'll come along. And if not, okay.
Right.
So, but, and that's a very different way of, and sometimes it causes, expectations, problems and stuff like that.
Well,
but
it causes growth in the relationship.
Yes.
It causes conversations. It causes a deepening of understanding, which nourishes a relationship.
Exactly. Especially when it's there at that place of unconditional, like of walking together, right? Versus interdependence.
Right.
And it was funny because my husband and I had a lot of contention about that discussion for a long time because I would always say the importance is not for me to need you or for you to need me at all. Like no need is needed.
Right.
And that used to
by choice.
Yeah. And it used to make him crazy until it took him like me years of saying that over and over until he finally got it. Because I said, it's that I choose to be here every day. It is my choice. It is my preference. Right.
It's my pleasure that I'm here.
It's my pleasure that I'm here. Exactly.
Not my needing something, not my lack. I'm
obligation.
Yes. I'm here in abundance, not lack.
Yes. And that's a completely different presence. Right. And so many times we're doing stuff out of obligation or out of fear. Right. And those are the limits of attachment. Right. When we say, oh, I have to have this standard of living. To have the standard of living, this is how we work it in our culture. I have to have this much money in the bank, right? And to have this much money in the bank, I have to deny myself these things that bring me pleasure so I could put that money in the bank so that I could say that I'm holding this kind of lifestyle, even though I'm really not, because I'm limiting myself and not trusting that the universe is going to amply provide as long as I, explore my abundance and explore my passion versus base my foundation on limitations and lack. What a different way of doing it, and so but there's so many layers, and that's a challenging thing for us to start with. And that's where many say, where do I start? And I always say, start with meditation, start with looking inside, start with, being, because yes, we have such a powerful way of shifting. And all it takes when you go inside and start really tapping into that, all it takes are little nudges. It doesn't take some big, massive ritual. It just takes shifting that vibration consciously.
And it's such a great exercise, even for the beginner, because there's so much to be gained by just having that acceptance of whatever comes to you in those moments that you choose to just be quiet
Yes.
and non-judgmental and accepting and compassionate for yourself. And that's a great exercise in and of itself, even if it's for 3 minutes.
Mhm.
And you'll find that you'll start to crave it. It's like I carve out that time for myself, and it's so enriching
Yes.
and so nourishing. And the part that's the best part of it is that downtime of the judgment and the criticism
Yes.
and
Putting it all on
and
the shelf for a little bit.
right.
Yeah.
And that self-acceptance. And I mean, that is just, and what's the saying? I don't have time to meditate for 5 minutes. Well, then you should for 15.
Right. Right. Or an hour. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Right.
Yes. And so, and yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've like, and that's where I always start with clients is, are you meditating? Are you doing some sort of meditation work where you are stepping out of the chatter of your mind and just sitting with yourself?
Right. And I
Without
mean, if it makes you feel better, don't call it meditation. Say, quiet time, me
Right.
time,
Time out.
whatever. Right. Time out. That's perfect. That's
Right.
perfect. Right.
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 I mean,
Because
like literally sitting in a bath last night. And it's funny because my kids had gotten me like a little spa basket thing, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go take a bath. And I had, the little like a face mask, and they had the eye thing. So I was there at the bath and I had the eye thing on and I had the face mask on, and I was like in my meditation zone, and I was probably the most present, and it was fabulous. I felt great, and I didn't do anything. I was just present there
right.
for that 25, 30 minutes or whatever. So, and then it was funny because then like something came clear to me that I had been missing just by sitting with it, and letting the edges soften without any judgment to say, so what are you sitting here for? Like, what is that about? Right.
Right.
And, many of the people who we interchange with regularly, who are watching this or listening to this, are those well along and know how to do energy work and everything else. And what happens is the ego inserts itself very craftily into that intention of, oh, I can do something, so I must do something all the time. Right.
Right.
And it sounds counterintuitive to the ego to say, well, with the tsunamis getting bigger, the best thing to do is nothing.
Right. Right.
And the ego's like, what are you talking about?
Right. My hair's on fire.
Exactly. And so it's sitting with it before doing anything, sitting with it. And also knowing that attachment thing is a big message for ourselves. Because if we are really attached to saying something has to look this way, something has to be this way, I won't let myself do this, do something in this that will actually let me live my bliss because of an attachment that I have, then it's really one of the biggest messages for us to look at and say, so what's that attachment about?
Right.
Why is it there? Why do I allow it to maintain itself in a way that's self-responsible, right? Not, oh, because that person told me I have to. Well, then why do I care? Like, and that's the exercise I've given for how long in the Trinity One courses is the what do I care exercise is why do I care? Till you get to a place of saying, because I believe it values me, because I believe that, I'm worthless without it, without that approval.
Unlovable without
or
it.
unlovable or whatever. 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, that's where you get down to.
Exactly.
And then the more we can sit with it in that place of the time out without judgment and in acceptance, the more then we can explore self-love and self-nourishment unconditionally. And the more we do that, the less we want to take that back from the shelf, that judgment and stuff.
Well, and the more we do that, the more we're able to ride these Richter waves that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
and have a better understanding of what's here for me,
Mhm.
and the high highs and the low lows, and then the long overarching vibrations. I mean,
Yes.
it's putting your oxygen mask on first so you can help others.
I mean, and the reality is at a collective level, we've already held ourselves at this vibration to change. And that's why things are so chaotic.
Right.
And so, you know, what I keep on doing, which seems like, and this sort of came to me over the weekend too, is I keep on aligning myself with that collective vibration, which then makes things sometimes for me, makes it feel more chaotic in my reality because I'm aligning myself with that collective vibration consciously, which then makes it go faster, more completely.
Right.
It's all good. But then, you know, it comes clearer, faster, and everything else. So, you know, it's not a magic pill. There are no magic pills. There are no rituals or ceremonies or practices that are going to do a be all end all thing, right? It's going to come down to you allowing it within yourself. And for the faster and bigger the road or freeway that we make into the center of ourselves in allowance and nurturing and acceptance, the better we can traverse. You know, and it's funny, the Richter wave, what a combination of great like analogy, right? Because you think of earthquakes and you think of tsunami, and if you put them together, like what, right?
Right.
The ground is shaking and the waves are flowing, the huge waves are flowing, you know. So
Yeah.
it feels like, and it's getting bigger, right?
Right.
Before it busts open.
Yep.
And that's what I feel like we're ready to do. And the thing is, do we want it to be devastating? And we've been saying this for several years. Do we want it to be a cataclysmic event, or do we want it to just be a catalytic set of events?
Right. Yep.
Much different in energy.
Yes. So what's our intention today to help people bring about this surfing these waves?
Well,
We need to allow.
I mean, we've done this though, so I'm sort of trying to figure out what
Right.
that different perspective is. Anybody here, if you have suggestions, put them in the chat.
Right.
What there is for us, like how you want to set our session here. Because we could say allowing ourselves to hold that vibration of the big change, right? But that's really big for a lot of people, right?
It really is. It really is.
Um,
I allow myself the understanding and trust this process that I've created for myself.
Michael says that whole concept of balancing out and making whole all obstacles and limitations. I don't think I understand that concept of balancing out and making whole all obstacles. Oh, making whole, right. Yeah. And that's the same in enormity, right?
Right. Right.
I mean, that's the whole thing. That's why I hesitate, because I'm going, well, this is enormous. This is not a tiny thing. And it's like, what's a biteable, a chewable bite, right?
Right.
Yeah. How about
Maybe start with the expansion of just seeing things in this new understanding.
being able to see things in this new understanding, to hold that space of acceptance for ourselves,
Right.
expanding past enormity. Yes.
Right.
Well, that's a good one, actually, because I did that last week in terms of something that I was working on. And I just basically did a meditation. I said, okay, well, let me expand beyond the change, right? My capacity. How's that? We can expand our capacity to hold it much bigger than the change as we hold that huge wave right, of recreation or creation, conscious creation, collectively and individually, in a place of acceptance and ease
Right.
and freedom. I guess that's still pretty big.
Right.
None of this is small anymore. That's the challenge.
Right. Which, we're already in the midst of it. So yeah.
Allowing makes a big difference in the way we experience it. Allowing the detachment, allowing the flow, allowing the wholeness, allowing it all to come together, trusting, like you said, right?
Right.
Letting go of the past expectations, allowing to go beyond the wildest expectations, like all of that tied up in a nice little bow. How's that? I feel okay?
Yeah.
All right. All of that.
Right.
All right. So everybody take a breath, sit back, get comfortable, close your eyes as we step out of separation, back into wholeness. And we hold ourselves with the vibration where that is our truth. That is from where we exist, create, and experience. All right. That felt really
I need
good.
some more of that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I saw, interestingly enough, I saw like right away this huge elephant. And I realized it was like the visage of Ganesha, right? And Ganesha
Right.
in the, I guess it's Hindu religion, is the clear of the path, right? Clear is your path. And I was like, oh, that's exactly what we're looking at. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. I felt like I popped energetically. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Good. But yeah, and it was funny because then it was almost like I was sitting on the elephant, sitting on Ganesha or whatever. And it was like we're walking through and everything just started to part. And I'm like, yes, yes. And then I could see everything as it just sort of parted and flowed out. And I was like, oh, that felt so awesome.
Right. Right. Yeah. I kept seeing like space travel, like, not in a spaceship or whatever, just planet, solar systems, universes, just traveling through them, and that expansion and that just acceptance of understanding. And it was just like, I need some more of that.
Yes, absolutely. That was beautiful. So come back and do that again and again.
Right.
This
Right. Absolutely.
And if you find these things help, make sure you share with other people, forward this on your social media, let others know that you are enjoying this. Let us know in the chats, like, even after in the videos, like what came up for you or any questions.
Yeah.
And thanks for joining us.
Yes.
So yes, go ahead.
Change our name.
Oh, yes, that's right. Let's talk about that. So this is our first episode in the new name, right, of Living Ascension. And we're going to be changing the page today. Well, we changed the page name to Living Ascension, but not the URL. So that will be changing to Living Ascension. And we will have to work that out with our Podbean account as well.
Right.
That out too. But same podcast, just more adapting to what we really talk about, and what it really is about is really living what we understand as ascension in a completely different way. So yeah, give us feedback on that too. So thanks for joining us. We will see you next week. This is Angela Coulter.
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
And you know what? I just thought I said Ascended World in the beginning, didn't I? I forgot about that.
Signing off. I didn't even notice.
Signing off with this week's Living Ascension.
Right.
So have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you.